SDRescue. Today, again, joined by Grayson Fulbright, we're going to be breaking down real cold email and rewriting them. Hopefully everyone will find something they can apply to their outreach. And don't forget, you can connect with Grayson or I on LinkedIn and send us your cold email. This week we're going to do one that I received personally. And let's jump right into it. Let's get into the email. Okay. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see this. So here's our color code. Got orange, that's brand seller information. Blue is customer profile, personalization, future state, pain points, incentives, and storytelling. All right, so here we go. Hi, Austin. I'm founder and president at our company, a New York-based product studio with a focus on strategy and innovation. We partner with companies like Citi, Pepsi, and IBM to match their business needs to a custom digital solution. Having worked with IBM in the past, we created a robust marketing solution in the form of an iOS application for their cloud service, IBM Cloud. With an intuitive design and an elegant UI, we were able to provide prospective customers with a seamless experience. Our product has been employed by IBM employees at press events, trade shows, and client meetings, where it has allowed eager and skeptical clients alike to be easily converted to the IBM ecosystem. We've also worked in team augmentation models many times, so we can be utilized anywhere you need support, whether it be product strategy, design, front-end or back-end dev, or all of the above. Do you have time this week for a quick 15-20 minute phone call? I'd love to learn more about how you might want to work with external teams. So that's the initial email. Then a few days later, I got this follow-up. Hi, Austin. Wondering if you had a chance to check out our company yet. In our previous work with IBM, I'm happy to send you our portfolio of digital products if that's helpful. Let me know if you work exclusively with internal teams or if there's an opportunity for us to collaborate. On a side note, here's when I was featured on Bloomberg News and the Bloomberg link. Okay. So right off the bat, you all can see this is very, very orange heavy, and for good reason. This email falls into a common trap of talking a lot about the vendor company and what they do. And because really you're explaining your previous experience. This is almost like a case study framed as a cold email. And so the challenge that you're going to have is, unless I'm really, really hot on buying this right now, like I'm currently in market or about to enter the market for this solution, it's probably not going to get a lot of replies. That's my knee-jerk reaction, and that's obviously why I didn't reply to it. But Grayson, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, when it comes to talking about yourself and talking about what you want and what you think the prospect wants to hear, a clock is started. And from that point, if people don't find information that's either like A, relevant to them, or B, like at least intriguing enough to keep them reading, they're just going to stop reading and probably either skip the email altogether or go straight down to the bottom of the email because they want to know, okay, you sent me this, what do you want? And if I was reading this, if I got this email, to be honest, I feel like the second sentence kind of tells me what they do. It's really vague. It's not enough to where I'd be motivated to take action, but they could have removed everything else orange in this email and just said, we partner with these companies to match their business needs to a custom digital solution. I feel like everything else was superfluous. And when you get into kind of sharing information about yourself or kind of talking about yourself, you need to do it for a reason. Because I think what this looks like is they're obviously trying to impress you. They're obviously talking about themselves at every chance so that you know how important they are. But that's not how sales works. You don't reach out to a buyer and say, we're super important, you should spend time with me. Sometimes it works if they're in market. But for the most part, they're going to read that and be like, I don't care about you. And so I think what this person did wrong, it's not always a bad idea to talk about yourself. You know, it's customized depending on the situation. But what you don't want to do is just talk about yourself for the purpose of persuading someone to find you credible. You don't persuade people to find you credible by giving arguments. You do things and share information about what's relevant to them, so the credibility and trust actually builds. So that's my initial thoughts on this. I think the only other thing to note is it's a very long email. Even if it was all valuable, I just don't know if I'd be able to actually read through that whole thing.
Yeah, depending on what level you're reaching out to, it's way too long. Especially for the companies you name dropped. Those are all Fortune 2000 companies. So my initial thoughts, well, other than the ones that I gave earlier, I think you're spot on. And I think this email, parts of it, I think a big chunk of this email, especially the case study part, are a good reply. Like a second or third email, like a reply to the prospect replying to you. Because in my mind, if you're targeting, first of all, I'm not at a Fortune 2000 company. So you're flexing a bunch of social proof that's irrelevant to me. Like, we don't operate anything like Citibank or IBM. Literally, we look nothing like them on the inside or the outside. And the other thing is that when you're reaching out in that first email, like you said, you want it to be about what the prospect cares about, which typically is problems, challenges they're having, or getting them to a future state they want to achieve, accomplishing some initiative. And if you've discussed a couple of those problems initially, if you've had a conversation either offline at a trade show or in thread, I could see you replying saying, hey, well, actually, we did this thing with IBM. Then it kind of makes sense in the right context. But as an initial outreach email, as like a greeting, a lot of people actually succumb to this trap at like in-person networking events where they just kind of, the really boring elevator pitch where it's like, hey, we are important and we did this stuff with big name companies and this is what we do, if you want to put us in a box. So unfortunately, they've put themselves in a box, in a category, and if I'm not looking for what's in that box, no reply. I'm not going to engage with you. And you see it in the reply as well, where it's all orange, and it ends with, hey, here's when I was featured in Bloomberg News. And maybe that sort of like name dropping and social credibility is needed when you're targeting Fortune 2000. And trying to, because I understand that when you're in the enterprise and you're going after big named accounts, you do need to prove that you've handled things of that scale. And I understand why they're doing that. It's just executed in the wrong way, where it comes off as flaunting instead of social credibility because it lacks the context in a conversation. So I think that's a good summary for where we're at with the.
I completely agree. Before I start, can you?
Yeah. Where do you want me at on the email?
Can you hear me, Austin?
Yep, I can hear you. Might be breaking up a little bit. I think we're losing Grayson.
Awesome. Yeah. I was just going to wrap up by... Okay. Well, just interrupt me if I break up too much. I can switch over.
All right, video's back.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you very well.
Awesome. All right. Before I lose my connection again, I wanted to just quickly recap on your point by saying like social proof is important. And what this guy is trying to do essentially is leverage social proof to build that credibility. And I agree that really when you're doing social proof, it's not about how impressive you are. It's about how close you get to their situation. That like this email could have like included some like startup companies or some like pre-revenue companies, but if it was close to the person or kind of adjacent to the industry that this person's in, it would work. It doesn't need to be like an IBM or like a Pepsi for it to be adequate social proof. And then to kind of give my final thoughts, I think what we should call out here is both emails do not provide any incentive or value exchange for the reader. It simply states information and then asks for next steps.
Yeah,
And
there's no
that I
pink.
think is it's a big conversation killer because unless they're in market, they're gonna need a little bit of incentive to spend time with you and not the other, 100 people that are reaching out about this.
Especially Fortune 2000 level, forget it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so let's take a look at the rewrites here. Oh, a lot more colors. That's my initial reaction just visually. And much shorter. Wow, okay. Today's online users expect a lot from digital experiences. Seamless interfaces, dedicated support, omnichannel access, and more. These expectations can take a heavy toll on understaffed or unprepared product teams. Our brand, so our company, helps partners like Citi and IBM trailblaze amazing digital projects that excite audiences, improve conversions, and evangelize customers for their brand. Could I send over a few case studies to see if it makes sense to connect further? That's awesome. Okay. And then the follow-up to that, just following up about the digital experiences your company's managing online. Are you open to reviewing a case study of the digital experiences we've helped build for brands like Pepsi, IBM, and Citigroup? Great. All right, so tell us a little bit about what's going on here, other than changing the colors you highlighted the words.
Yeah, so to start, I do want to identify that the space this person is in, I think, is difficult for something like cold email, because what they're essentially doing is providing custom product and app development services for companies that might not necessarily kind of be founded on a software or a product. So a perfect example is like Citigroup. It's a bank, and so they definitely have software, but it's not their main deal. It's more based on innovation. And so when you're
Pepsi, right?
trying
Pepsi is
to
basically an advertising company.
exactly, yeah, exactly. So when you're writing emails to anyone, and I do this for every email I send, any client campaign I manage, you want to go in and do the research to really understand what you're getting into. And in this situation, it's really hard for me to tell if a company is working on a digital project. That most certainly takes at least a conversation, let alone a discovery call. And so I really have to front load with the assumptions I make. And so that's why, if I were doing this in this space, I would have actually led with an intro line that had personalization in it. But I wanted to keep it fair, wanted to just kind of use the framing and the messaging that the original emails had. And so what I did is I just led with a claim that I'm hoping, because I know this space is difficult to qualify through, I'm hoping this claim triggers people to open it because of what it says. Because they should identify and kind of resonate with the idea like, oh boy, yeah, you better bet users expect a lot out of digital experiences. And that's why I framed it that way. And then as soon as I do that, I go into kind of presenting some of that future state, some of that vision that maybe they're lacking without saying it. Do they have a seamless interface? Do they have dedicated support for their users? And are they accessible on, mobile and tablet? Those are things that can get people thinking without having to tell them a whole product story about what you do and what you're about. Of course, in the middle, you always have to have pain. I think that's another mistake that the previous emails have. And that is where I placed it. To kind of wrap up my first line, I'm trying to say those things above that probably got you to read the email can really take a toll on product teams if they don't have enough people or don't have enough expertise to get it done. And then the rest, because of the fact that this is a very, I think, high dollar, longer sales cycle type deal, I'm just kind of being a little soft touch on it. I'm saying, hey, here's what we do and the future states we provide. Would you like to see a case study? I'm not trying to ask for time on their calendar because they probably don't have a digital product. It's a very low chance that they have a digital product in development right now and they could use our service. And so in this situation, I'd be doing a long play here. Understand that this is a high value deal. that will take time to nurture, and that this first touch is just the beginning. It's just to get the door cracked, not even open. And so your CTA should be very clear, very easy, and also have value. And the value there is they can see case studies on some digital products. Not the most valuable thing, it's not an audit, but for someone who's in market or kind of moving down funnel and starting to do some research, that might be something that they'll say yes to. And I've actually used this approach with other clients in the past where they're a service agency or a consultant and they offer like really high ticket services with like long engagements. And this is a really effective way to start conversations without actually having to like, you know, dig in and either make bad assumptions or piss people off by always asking for a call.
Yeah. And for us, we actually just started last week. We're A/B testing a sequence where we talk about two or three pain points that we think, based on firmographic data, the prospects data, and perhaps something that we find directly on LinkedIn or something else, but primarily based on firmographic data that we make inferences about within our own customer base because it's large enough to draw conclusions, where we're doing this exact same thing where we either send over a case study or our recommendations based on what we've done and seen with customers that look and are exactly where they are or were before they engaged with us. And so I've written an email very similar to this one, and I'm excited to see how well it converts. And really, I'm just looking to, I think something like this can help start quality conversations. Because what I think people don't understand is with prospecting is a lot of times they write emails like the top ones that are very myopic, like, hey, are you in the market to buy right now? And you're just trying to find a yes, 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 yes. But I think what we miss is there's people on the fence or relatively close to entering market, they just didn't know it. And without having a quality discussion or conversation and perhaps elevating that need to a priority, you can get dollars, you can get buy-in, and you can get people to move from out of market into market and bring them in. But you're not going to do it with a single threaded email that says, hey, here's what we do. We do it for big companies. We're really cool. Do you want to talk about it, about doing it? And that email has been written a lot of different ways, but ultimately there's a lot of outreach like that, right? And then your follow-up's really good, nice and short. Said just following up about digital experiences that you're managing online. Are you open to reviewing case study? So back on the case study, so you want to see. So you're following back up with a similar call to action.
Yeah.
Do you want to go into the thought process behind that?
Yeah. So to kind of frame my thoughts about follow-ups before we go, I over the years have phased myself out of using quick, kind of like just short follow-ups like this, where it's tied to a similar message. You can usually see the previous message basically underneath the follow-up that you send. And I've just, with cold, like first initial touches, I've noticed that can work really well if you have good messaging, and it can piss a lot of people off if you don't have the right messaging. And so just to kind of frame that at the beginning, and then moving into kind of why I did the follow-up the way I did, you have to understand that the way follow-ups work is people are busy. People forget. Even if someone's interested, you can't really ever tell why someone did or didn't open or respond to an email. And so the whole concept behind a follow-up is getting them back on track with that email you just sent, reiterating the offer in an even shorter way to see if you can squeeze that conversion. And I think what a lot of people do wrong with follow-ups is they send a follow-up email and then have a new pitch with new messaging and new information and a new CTA. So someone's going to read this follow-up and maybe they were happy at first. They say, oh, thanks, you followed up, I forgot, let me go check it out. And if you have all this new information, all these new variables that you're adding in, and then a completely new CTA, they have to rethink about everything. Whereas if you send very clear about a specific theme, and that's how I always organize like outbound sequences, is even if it's one email and a follow-up email, If that follow-up email is for this email, that's all the same theme. Because like we've talked about in past episodes, you can track that. If someone responds to an email about having understaffed product teams, or they respond to a follow-up email kind of like focused on this idea of digital products and getting support, you can have that in your CRM as this is the messaging that got them to respond and agree to a meeting. And so that's why I tried to stay really laser focused, both in the follow-up and in the single email, so that everything was in line, and no matter which one they read first, it would all make sense and all be very structured.
Yeah, and I think so. I think what you just said is a great tip. Like, if you're a rep out there, and let's say even if you're just doing it manually out of Salesforce or your CRM, or you have a tool like Outreach, Yesware, things like that, take note on what step in the sequence people are replying and what the subject matter of their reply is regarding, right? Like, those themes are super important. And the challenge that you have when you're leading with an email like this one is that if the prospect isn't on the theme of what you are and what you do, then, which is going to be a very minuscule amount of people, like, they have to literally be thinking, hey, I need an outsourced development company right now. I'm really looking for one. I wish one would email me or call me. And there's just not, there are people like that. They're just not as frequent as somebody who, in the back of their mind, they know, man, I wish I had more heads to add to our team because we've never built an app before. Or more likely, like you were explaining earlier, we've never built an app, not too sure how to do it. It's not really our forte, but we have the money and capability to hire out a whole program around it. But it sure would be nice to outsource it. Like, I mean, big companies, Fortune 2000, a lot of them love to outsource stuff. I mean, I worked with a lot of government agencies prior, and they outsource tons of stuff to contractors, right? So the bigger the company is, the more likely it can, not only that it can afford to outsource, but also that it has the financial wherewithal and is more comfortable working in that environment. So I think that the first email really disregards, it's written from a seller's perspective and not a buyer's perspective. And that's the challenge with it. And I think what you did was totally flip that around. You led with the seller's problems, or at least what you think they could be. And if you're wrong, that's okay. They might reply and tell you why you're wrong, and then you know their perspective, right? I think people are missing the point with prospecting emails is, like, if you can get a value, an insightful or contextual dialogue on what the prospect's world is inside that business, because every business is different. Every IBM type company might make the same product or same widget, but their company might function completely differently, and the problems they have will be completely different. If you can just get a window inside of what's going on inside that company, you'll be able to qualify them or find problems or contextually apply your solution in your outreach. And I think that type of homework and dialogue isn't happening on a part of by the fault of the salesperson, not the prospect. I think there's lots of prospects willing to discuss those things.
Yeah. I wanted to touch up on a point that I think you've kind of brought up in a hidden way repeatedly. But I mean, I think the stats that I've seen, they vary, but it's around 97 to 96% of any market on average is not in market to buy. And I think that the big challenge that causes people using cold email to fall on their face is this idea behind it's a magic bullet. And if I just send emails to the right list, it will absolutely convert into meetings and or revenue. And I think what people forget is those numbers. You should be expecting 3 to 5% of your market, depending on industry, at any given time to actually be in market or researching solutions in your space. So if you write an email that's expecting them to be in market, well, guess what? You're going to piss off 96 to 95% of your market and maybe convert some from that 5%. And I think that the difference between the emails I'm making and the emails we've been reviewing on a big picture scale is they're really forgetting about the rest of their market. Just like in cold calls, you don't cold call someone and then if they're not ready to have a meeting, you say, okay, bye forever, and just like delete them from the CRM. No. And yet so many people treat email that way. They just mass send emails to a bunch of people. And if they're in market, they're completely ignored. Messaging doesn't change. Like they don't do any additional research. And they, some people, I don't know if you've seen this, Austin, but some people will just resend you the same outbound email campaign. So 3 months later, it's the same damn campaign, literally word for word, and they just wanted to plug me back into it. And I think the point I'm trying to make is like, you're using cold email as a way to start outbound conversations. And that is done differently in every industry and for every buyer, because like you said, every situation is unique and everyone's at a different stage in their buying cycle. And so like the final advice I have for this email is you need to keep in mind that 97%, because if you don't, if you're only focused on these like bluebirds, your messaging is gonna get impacted by that. You're gonna all of a sudden be maybe getting more meetings and more replies, but your open rates are crap. So no one's opening your emails. Only those that are that in market will actually open and then they'll reply. And I think that's just one example, but in general, when you write emails, when you like are trying to like run outbound sales and grow pipeline, you have to account for everyone and not just this tiny percentage that are ready to hop now.
Yeah, I think so. At least in my experience, top reps. I mean, so everybody else. So most people write email to the 3 to 4% and offend the 96. Top performers write to the 96 and convert 30% of those into the market, which is outside of the scope of this email. But if you want to be a top performer, if you want to hit President's Club, you've got to figure out a way to move people who aren't in market to understanding, oh, I do have this problem, I should move into market, and I'm going to buy with the guy that engaged me first, or girl, the salesperson. That's really the money. That's how you make more money than the substantial rest of the call floor. All right, looks like we're almost here at the top of the hour. Any last parting words, Grayson, you wanna give us? Or are we pretty good with this email?
Yeah, I think we're pretty good with this email. Just to kind of go back to the original boo-boo that I think this email made is, we talk about this in previous episodes. Please don't make your emails look like a landing page. You have to remember that when you're reaching out to people, you're expecting them to spend time with you, which kind of goes into your and your brand's reputation. So don't waste your reputation and your chance to build a relationship to just basically regurgitate information that they can find on the website. An email or a call, or however you do it, that is supposed to be a way to generate a conversation through some unique exchange of information or value. And regurgitating something that they can find on a website is not how to do it.
Yes, I agree. So everybody watching, don't forget to subscribe to SD Revolution. You can follow SD Revolution on LinkedIn and go to the SD Revolution website. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn, Austin Fuller, Grayson Fulbright on LinkedIn, and all my social channels are on my LinkedIn profile anyway, so you can find them there. And we do this every Monday at 11:30 Eastern, and we'll be back next week with another cold email.
Yep. Thank you so much, Austin, for joining us. And thank you to everyone who joined us for this session. I'll see you next week.
Yep. Talk to everyone later. Thanks.